Sorry for the delay. I had to work this weekend, so it took me longer to get around to writing this than I had intended. First, I'll address a question from the comments. No, we did not buy the house from Heather's parents. Looking through ownership records, it looks like they had sold the house in 2001 to the woman who I bought the house from. She was a young single mother who moved out of state, from what I recall that our realtor said. My wife came home Friday night to me feverishly reading Heather's journal. She was intrigued, but not nearly as much as I am. Here are some of the things I learned about Heather from her journal. She was madly in love with this Michael Collin guy. They had known each other their whole lives. He also lived in the neighborhood. She paints a picture that leads me to believe that their mothers were very close friends for a long time before the children came into the picture. The two families would sometimes vacation together. Heather and Michael had celebrated their one-year anniversary on Valentine's Day, 1978. I'm honestly kind of in love with their love story. The stuff with Mrs. Thompson gets weirder. Heather is much more descriptive in her journal than she was in the letter. She even starts the journal at the beginning of 1978, in her words, to document the strange things that my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, has been doing. She also mentions she started the journaling when Anna died. Her father recommended the journal as an outlet for her feelings if she didn't want to talk about them. All in all, the Jones family sounds pretty sweet, and Heather loved her life aside from the Thompson debacles. She wrote about Mr. Thompson leaving. Prior to him leaving, there was a lot of shouting she could hear from next door. Her parents didn't know she had been eavesdropping on their conversations. Mr. Jones had known about Mr. Thompson's affair before anyone else in the neighborhood. He saw Mr. Thompson out with another woman on numerous occasions, and decided to tell Mrs. Jones when he saw them kissing. Mrs. Jones told him he should have a talk with Mr. Thompson. When Heather was supposed to be in bed, she crept down the stairs and sat quietly listening to her parents talk. It's weird because I can see the exact spot she sat in. There's a landing on 4 stairs down from the second story, and you can sit there without being seen through the banisters. I know this for a fact, because I made my wife sit there while I was on the couch, to test this out. She's nice enough to humor me with these things. While she was listening to the conversation between her parents, Mr. Jones revealed that Mr. Thompson, who we now know the first name is John, tried to give his wife all the help he could. John felt that he did his best in making her see that she needs counseling for her grief of Anna's death. She saw the priest at church for counseling, but nothing got better. She would often sit in Anna's room and cry, and didn't want John to come near her. Anna's room was preserved completely, and John was not allowed in the room. Mrs. Thompson's obsession, John relayed, is what ultimately tore them apart, and he sought comfort in the receptionist at work. Heather goes on to try to research what happened to Anna. She went to the local library and found an obituary, but not much else. I also did my own research, thanks to a suggestion, and found an article about Anna. Let me tell you, there are a lot of Anna Thompsons out there, but having some ideas of the year was helpful. It turns out, Anna died from playing by herself on some rocks. The authorities assumed she slipped and fell into the river, hitting her head on a rock in the process. The parents were initially questioned because of the situation seemed suspicious, but it was fairly quickly ruled as accidental. I looked up Detective Howard Parsons, who was the lead on the case. Honestly, I'm really interested to know why they found it suspicious. That's a dead end for now, though, because he is deceased. However, I may have a lead on that, which I will explain shortly. Heather was pretty terrified of Mrs. Thompson. She revealed in her journals that Anna often complained about her mom, and she tells Heather on numerous occasions, "I wish we could be sisters, and I can have your parents." One of Heather's chores was to bring in the mail every day after school. Her mom worked part-time, so she sometimes was not home when she got there. This is where a lot of creepy notes from Mrs. Thompson would surface. On 3 occasions, the note simply said, "I'm watching." Other times, there would be a folded piece of paper that was torn out from a book, with Anna's handwriting on it. Heather assumed these to be from Anna's journal, and they would contain various things from mundane daily activities to more juicy gossip. It turns out young Anna had a crush on Michael, who seemed destined to be with Heather. Heather writes, in one of the journal entries left for me, she says that she is in love with Michael, but she's happy enough if her best friend Heather can marry him. I'm assuming Anna wrote in her own journal about her secret flashlight code, which is how Mrs. Thompson chose that type of torment. Heather also admits that her mother has been feeling increasingly more uncomfortable around Mrs. Thompson as time goes by, and invites her over less frequently, but is still neighborly. Now, to my lead with the detective. I don't know if it's a huge coincidence or not, but Amy, one of the other girls from the time capsule, has the last name Parsons, the same as the detective. I've scoured Facebook for anyone named Amy Parsons, and I found a couple that still live in the state, but it's absurd of me to reach out to them to see if one of them might be from the time capsule. Jennifer hasn't been so easy to locate, as she only put her last initial on the letter she wrote. I checked the playbill that was left in there, and Amy Parsons was the only one that was involved doing hair and makeup. Of course, these could all be dead ends if she got married and changed her name. I have not found a Heather Jones that would match the age of Heather in the time capsule. I haven't yet searched for Michael. My wife keeps telling me that I should let this go, and I honestly feel the need to know what happened to Heather. After all, wouldn't it be cool to return their time capsule to them? I did catch one of my neighbors outside. Neither of them have the last name Thompson, by the way. The one I spoke to today is an older woman, and we were chatting while her husband was grilling. After some small talk, I asked her if she knew anything about the family that lived there before her. She said she didn't know very much because she wasn't even from the area and moved here due to her husband's job relocating him. I didn't want to tell her too much, but when she asked why I was curious, I simply said, just doing some research on the area before we got here. I'm really into local history. She chuckled, and I told her to have a good night. When I turned to go back into my house, she grabbed my arm, digging her nails into the most sensitive part of my forearm, and sternly said, "You know, some things are better left in the past." I ripped my arm away, feeling the light burn of scratch marks, and asked, "So is there something you have heard about in the neighborhood? Maybe from other neighbors?" At this point, I was really suspicious of her reaction. She smiled and said, "I wouldn't do any more digging, and I hope you understand what I'm telling you." I told her again to have a good night, and I walked into my house. I looked out my kitchen window towards their grill, and her husband was just happily making dinner, and she was still staring at me. I can't help but to feel like she knew exactly what information I found, and what I'm looking for. I know this all sounds crazy, but there are a lot of older people in this neighborhood, so someone has to know something, right? I think while writing this all out, I've made up my mind to try to contact Amy Parsons, and hope that one of them is the right one.